Welcome back to the Outage Files. Today's case file, we are talking about the Bangladesh bank heist and how hackers tried to steal nearly $1 billion and almost got away with it. This story starts with just a single word. Not a password, not a code, not a virus, but a single word. Jupiter. And for a few minutes in 2016, that word was the difference between losing $100 million and losing almost $1 billion. Picture this. It is a Thursday night in Dhaka, Bangladesh. The central bank is closed, the hallways are quiet, the weekend is about to begin. Inside the building, everything looks normal, but somewhere in the bank system, someone is already inside. This is Bangladesh Bank, a real central bank. A place that handles national reserves, a place trusted to move money across borders, and like many central banks, it keeps an account at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, because when you move money in US dollars, New York is often the center of gravity. Now the heist does not start with a mass vault drill. It starts with access. The attackers do not need to break the SWIFT network itself. They just need to hijack the point where SWIFT becomes real. The bank's own SWIFT terminal. The credentials, the workflows, and once you have that, you do not hack a bank. You impersonate it. On February 4th, 2016, the attackers begin sending transfer instructions through SWIFT. Not one, not two, but more than 36, 35 payment messages arriving at the New York Fed over a few hours. A flood of requests, each one politely formatted as if it is completely normal. Each one quietly asking for millions, and in total, nearly $1 billion. At the New York Fed, the first messages arrived just after 9:55 a.m. $20 million. Destination, Sri Lanka. Then more messages follow. Philippines, the Philippines again, and more Philippines, and the numbers just keep climbing. 10 million, 20 million, 30 million. It is like watching someone try every door in a building and realizing some of them might open. And here's what makes this story terrifying. These requests were unusual. They were not typical payments. They were often addressed to individuals, not institutions. They were missing details that usually appear in routine instructions. They came in a rapid burst, not a staged trickle, but they still started moving through the system. Because this is how global finance works. You do not send money, you send instructions. And if the instructions look legitimate, the machine tries to obey. Back in Dhaka, the bank has no idea any of this is happening. Because the weekend is starting, people are going home, and because the attackers planned it that way. And then comes a moment that feels like a horror movie. Bangladesh Bank's SWIFT setup is supposed to print a record of transactions automatically. It is one of the simplest safety nets imaginable. A paper trail that shows up every morning so staff can walk in, look at the tray, and know what happened overnight. But on the morning of Friday, February 5th, the tray is empty. No printouts, no records, nothing. At first, it looks like a boring office problem. A printer issue, a jam, some driver error. Except it is not. It is silence on purpose. When staff try to print manually, they cannot. The system complains that a critical file is missing or altered. Something is wrong with the terminal itself, and while they're trying to fix it, the New York Fed is sending questions, because New York is saying payments that do not feel right. New York wants confirmation. New York wants answers. But in Dhaka, nobody sees those messages in time. The attackers did not just send fraudulent transfers. They tried to blind the people who could stop them. And now we're in the most dangerous part of the story. The part where time zones become the weapons. Bangladesh and New York are both heading into the weekend, and the attackers are using the calendar like a getaway car. Meanwhile, inside the New York Fed, something triggers a deeper review. Something that does not sound like security. Something that does not sound cyber. A word and an address. Jupiter. One of the transfer instructions includes Jupiter as part of the destination bank details in the Philippines, and that word matches a name tied to US sanctions. Not because the hackers were connected to that sanctioned entity, but because the word overlaps. A coincidence, a fluke. The kind of fluke that saves hundreds of millions of dollars, because sanctions screening forces people to stop and look closer. And once they look closer, the whole batch starts to feel wrong. That is when many of the transfers are slowed, flagged, or held. That is when the bleeding starts to slow, but not before the damage has already been done. Because 5 transfers did get through. 5, not 35, not nearly $1 billion, but still enough to become legendary. A total of $101 million is released. $20 million to Sri Lanka, $81 million to the Philippines. And for the hackers, that is not a failure. That is a jackpot. When Bangladesh Bank finally pieces together what happened, panic does not even begin to describe it. They contact SWIFT. They contact the New York Fed. They try to stop whatever is still pending. But it is a weekend, and the response is slow, and the money has already moved. And now it is someone else's problem. Sri Lanka becomes the first clean break. The $20 million sent there is tied to a recipient named the Shalika Foundation. Except foundation is misspelled, and that misspelling becomes another lucky crack in the plan. That transfer is ultimately reversed and recovered. But the Philippines is where the story turns dark. The $81 million is sent into accounts at Rizal Commercial Banking Corporation, or RCBC. 4 accounts, names tied to individuals, and once that money lands, it does not sit there. It moves fast like someone is waiting beside the runway. At least 5 withdrawals happen in just over an hour, 73 minutes. And when the bank finally responds to the stop request, almost everything is already gone. What remains is basically a rounding error. But where did this money go? It fell into the gaps, into different laundering routes, and into channels that were not built to stop this kind of flow. Much of it is connected to the casino junket world, a place where money can be moved, exchanged, and blurred, a place where paper trails can get thin, and a place where, at the time, anti-money laundering controls were not as tight as banks. So now you have a nightmare. The attack is cyber, the money route is financial, and the cleanup is legal. And every part of it crosses the borders. Different regulators, different holidays, and different rules. It is the perfect mess. And then the blaming starts. Bangladesh points fingers at the New York Fed. Why did any of these transfers go through? The New York Fed points back. We asked questions, we flagged transactions, and we did not get timely confirmation. And in the middle is the truth that keeps showing up in modern incidents. Security is not just code. Security is people, the process, and the communication. And when one link goes quiet, everything gets louder. Investigators later described more warning signs, the burst of transactions, the unusual recipients, and the formatting anomalies. But the most haunting detail is still this. If the word Jupiter had not matched the sanctions list, this could have been $1 billion theft. And we might be telling a completely different story. This is why this case matters. Not because it was the first cyber heist or because it was the largest attempt, but because it proves something. A bank can be robbed without a gun, a central bank can be impersonated, and a global network can be used as intended and still become a weapon. Because a weak point is not always the network. Sometimes it is the endpoint. Sometimes it is the printer, the weekend, and sometimes it is just a single person who cannot answer a message in time. After the heist, SWIFT and banks around the world tightened their controls. More monitoring, authentication, and security programs, because the old assumption was simple. If it comes through SWIFT, it must be real. And Bangladesh Bank proved that assumption could be forged. And here is the final twist. The biggest offense in this entire story was not an advanced AI system. It was not a revolutionary encryption upgrade or some secret intelligence program. Instead, it was just a coincidence. A single word. Jupiter. So the next time you hear someone say, "It's fine, this passed the checks," remember this case, because once in a while, the checks only work because luck showed up to help. This has been the Outage Files. If you want the next case, subscribe and follow along, because the biggest failures in tech are not always loud. Sometimes they're silent. And by the time you notice, the money is already gone.